Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I am really interested in this topic because I'm going to imagine many of us have been thinking the same thing. So, 2022 is coming to an end, and we are slowly getting ready for 2023. And what that means is that we are now in year 3 of COVID times. And whether the scientists want to still call it a pandemic or an epidemic, the fact is that our lives have changed. And now things are different. But is it good? Is it stressful? Is it bad? We want to hear from you. How is it going year 3? So join us as we have a conversation about what it's like year 3 during COVID times.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee Time with Masterminds. My name is Peta Blakely, and I'm the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I am Cynthia Rojas, founder and principal of To Your Growth.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I'm Rebecca Tuttle, founder and principal of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds, a 30-minute show for and about leaders of mission-based organizations. And we've been spending the last 3 years talking about what it is like to lead during complex times. And we started the show based on the COVID pandemic, and now what we are realizing is that our times are still complex. So we want to welcome our listeners in Australia, our viewers throughout the U.S. and all over the world. And I want to welcome my co-host, Peta Blakely. Hi, Peta.
This. Fighting over the buttons.
I love that. We have these buttons that we click to bring people on, and sometimes we're doing it at the same time. How are you, Peta?
Good. How are you?
I am good. And so we have been inspired to do this show based on something that you said about it just feels so hard. Yeah. And Peta, we're not alone. It feels very hard for me as well.
Yeah.
But for many, many people, but it's a different kind of hard, right? So we just went through a crisis, right? And after the initial crisis, we had some ups and downs. We had some variants and some Omicron, and there are people who are now living with long-lasting health effects because of COVID. But it's still hard. And so I was wondering that we should talk about that, because if we're having this feeling, then I'm sure leaders of mission-based organizations are as well.
I think you just pointed out one of the reasons that it's so hard is that a lot of us were living through different versions of the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
I read something online that said something like, while you were watching Netflix and baking bread, we were holding funerals. That some of us mean the pandemic, the time when we had to stay in our house. Some of us mean the pandemic, the time when loved ones died, right? Or the pandemic, the time that we all lost our jobs and didn't know how we were going to pay the rent, right? These were completely different pandemics.
Yeah.
And I think that contributes to us having a hard time talking about this experience.
I love that. And the two of us are not representative of what the pandemic was like. We have our unique experience. I was very new into my business as a consultant. You were more seasoned, right? So you had a different perspective. I panicked when it came on and thought, what am I going to do? So that's one thing. But what's it like now? What does it feel like now?
I think it's just so awkward. Right? This was the first. I felt like this was the first year that we were expected to just go out and do normal things, right?
Yeah.
Events were happening again, and networking events were happening, and conferences were happening. We had to go out and act normal, and our social skills are a little bit rusty.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. I went out to lunch with someone, a business lunch, and it was really weird. First of all, I never know how to greet people.
Yeah, right.
Do I take out my hand?
Shake their hands. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do I hug you? Because I tend to be a hugger, right?
Hang on a second. Because my dog is tearing something up.
Oh.
We'll edit this part out. I'll be right back.
Okay. I will keep going. PETA is going to check on her dog because her dog is tearing something up. But I found myself going to lunch with someone and just feeling like, oh my, can I touch this person? How do I greet this person? Am I sitting far away? What does this person think about in terms of COVID and this relationship? And she admitted to me, PETA, that was her first in-person lunch since the pandemic hit. So we were both feeling a little awkward, but also holidays, just parties, weddings. Some are back, some are not. Some people wear masks, some people don't. Like,
yeah, I've been going to the theater and things like that.
Yeah. So you
every time I get there, I think, oh, this is a lot of people. This is
right?
A little strange. Yeah.
I do think of germs a little bit more than what I used to.
Yeah.
So
and I've had a lot of little miscues, like a little conversational misfires, right? The kind of thing where like somebody says happy birthday and you say you too, like that kind of thing. And then mulling over them a lot afterwards, like, oh no, that was terrible. And and realizing like I think some of it is just we're rusty, right? We're not, the conversations aren't flowing as well. And there is some cognitive thing about like keeping track of a conversation over time, keeping track of conversations when you might talk to 3 or 4 people at once, which you didn't really do for a couple of years. And it's hard. It takes a little bit more energy than it did pre-pandemic. And I don't think we all gave ourselves enough extra space for that. Right.
Yeah.
And this is people who practiced these skills for 40, 45, 50 years before, right? Imagine how hard it is for people who are 5 years old or 10 years old or 16 years old, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that would just be awful. Right.
Yeah. And like you mentioned before the show that you've been practicing your social skills your whole life, right? So that's been a lot of years. And now it feels like you're starting over.
Yeah.
And I totally feel that pain. I love when you said, how do we talk to 3 people at the same time, right? Because
how do you talk to people when their name isn't floating under their face?
I know. We gotta go back to remembering names. Can you imagine? But like so this morning I was preparing for an on-site retreat that I will be doing. And it's really funny because in one of the slides, instead of saying writing that we're going to go into groups, I just to have a good time put a picture called breakout rooms. And so at first I automatically went to put a picture of a breakout room because that's what we do in Zoom. And yet I'm going to be in person. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to leave that there because that's been our life. And everybody knows what it means to go into a breakout room. Yeah. I love it. But I want to feel, I do feel your pain. Your pain. I have not been to a networking event. Have you?
No, I am going to an event next. Well, actually, that's not true because I went to a conference. So, yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right. We did a show at your conference.
Yeah. And there were like social events there. Yeah.
So I remember going to that conference with you several years ago, and the rooms were small. Were they small this time, or did they get bigger rooms?
I think they got bigger rooms. I do think that there was some thought about things like the volume of air relative to the number of people. So I think that the rooms were bigger. relative to the number of people.
Uh-huh.
The facility had very high ceilings, so there was a lot of space.
Yeah.
The big room where they held the plenary was adjacent to a huge space where they had the area where vendors set up
Uh-huh.
tables and do displays, and they did not close the wall there, so it was just kind of contiguous, right? And air was
Nice.
circulating across a huge space. And when the room got to capacity, they came and moved people
Oh,
away
wow.
and put them in
Wow.
overflow rooms. So I do think that there is like a different consciousness about
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we want to talk about pressure, feeling
Yeah.
pressure. And so what pressures are you feeling today that may
Yeah.
not have been so pressureful? I just made up a word.
Yeah, you know,
man.
is this just normal kind of end of year thing? I think somebody said, and this was like 2 years ago, was it you?
Mhm.
Somebody said we're all so busy justifying the fact that we're okay.
Mhm.
I think there's been a realization that this is just how it is, right? There was a long time that we were waiting for things to go back to something, back to normal,
Yeah.
right? I mean, for a good year or two, we thought we were going back to normal. Now we realize we're never going back to normal. This is just how it is.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a little bit of making up for lost time that's going on, but it feels
Yeah.
like there's a lot of pressure for a lot of productivity.
Yeah. I love that. You had mentioned about, for some of us,
Yeah.
we experienced a break, right? We
Mhm.
experienced a break from humanity. We
Yep.
got to really look inward. Again, those of us who had that experience, I do want to
Mhm.
honor the many people that went to work every day. But for many of
Yeah,
us,
it had an opposite experience.
yes, for many of us, we got to take a break from life, right?
Mhm.
And for some, the pressure was not as high, although there were different pressures that you named in the beginning of the
Yeah.
show, but they weren't as high, and we
Well, all
got
these
to enjoy
activities
our
disappeared,
family.
right? Right.
Uh-huh.
People weren't, driving around and going to things all the time because the things
Right.
were canceled, right? And that
Yeah.
created a lot of extra space for some people.
Yeah. And then there's all these other after effects of
Mhm.
COVID. Like it's harder to buy a car now because inventory is low. It's
Yeah.
challenging to fix your house because the price of everything has gone up. Right.
Yeah.
So there are still these lingering effects that make
Mhm.
it challenging. And I heard somewhere that although cruise ships now are fully opened, they're more expensive than what they were. And so I was like, how dare you? How dare you raise your price? So we have that to deal with also. So
Yeah.
the pressure is very different. Right now, if you're taking a walk in the middle of the day, it might feel like you felt pre-COVID, where
Yeah.
that was guilt provoking, right?
Yeah.
And not acceptable. Where before, during COVID, we were all hiking.
Right.
Some
All
of
the
us.
time.
Yeah.
I mean, is that because we're trying to take our pre-COVID work ethic and just kind of mash it onto our post-COVID working conditions?
Is it guilt?
Yeah,
Is it guilt?
maybe.
Right? And so we wonder. And I think about, Peter, I have spoken to so many leaders in these 2.5 years, and many of them a couple of months ago or earlier this year were taking a vacation for the very first time, right?
Yeah.
But some of them are still dealing with staff being out a lot, staff wanting to stay home when that is no longer allowed or can be done. They're back to the office, dealing with the Great Resignation, and so it's so much pressure. It's different, and it just continues with our leaders of nonprofit organizations, and we have to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
We have to be really mindful of that.
Yeah, I mean, they worked so hard and they were so isolated at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yes.
And then I think we've seen a huge amount of turnover at that level, partly because they were just burned out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And as a consultant, we get many phone calls for strategic planning. There are so many organizations who may have had a plan, right? And may have had the plan just before the pandemic, but it's going to be 3 years. So most of the plans expire. But things are even different from 2 years ago, right? And so the need to reflect and to look at what the ecosystems look like now is something that nonprofits are starting to recognize and reach out to consultants on that. So it's been tough. It's been really, really tough. And if that was not enough, you and I moved to different states
Everybody
during
moved.
the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what's the aftermath of that now? Like, what is it like now, a year into, well, you are a year and a half into your new location. I am 1 year into my new location. Tell me a little bit
And
about
this
what
is
that feels
the
like.
first time that I'm starting to really feel like I have to network and connect here, because at the beginning when we moved, geography was irrelevant.
Right.
Yeah. And now it actually makes sense to network in this city and meet people in the city. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an added pressure. Right. And so for me, it feels the same way. I feel this enormous amount of pressure to build my business in the state that I live in. And then I'm going back and forth to see my clients, which is great. I'm loving the travel. But the pressure, and it feels like now I have 3 full-time jobs, right? So I run my business and then I do the work. I'm a consultant. And now I have to build another segment of my business. And so that feels tough. I also still feel isolated, right? Because I don't have friends. Excuse me. I don't have friends here and I don't have colleagues. So it feels very different and almost as isolating as it did during COVID. Do you feel the same?
No, I don't feel isolated. We have been very lucky about making friends here. And I think professionally, when you are a small business owner, especially kind of mostly one person shops like we are, that's always isolating, right?
Yes.
I have had this great opportunity to be in 10,000 small businesses this year. So that's connecting me with a lot of other small business owners. And that's been tremendous.
And that's a program. And I think we're going to do a show about that. Tell me a little bit about that program. Tell our listeners.
Yeah, it's this is a growth program for small businesses. It's completely free in terms of money for the business owner to participate in, because Goldman Sachs pays for it. And it's kind of like getting an MBA in one semester.
Wow.
You walk through every aspect of your business and make a growth plan. The idea being that small businesses provide most of the employment in the United States. And if they can help them grow, they will employ more people and create more value.
Oh, what a great philosophy.
Yeah, it's a fantastic program. It takes a lot of time. It's a big commitment. And not-for-profits can also participate.
Nice.
Yeah, so some people might want to look into it.
Wow. So we'll definitely do a show about that, because nonprofit scaling is also another pathway that many nonprofits are now really honing in on, because they've had to learn how to adapt, and they had to grow different segments of their organization during COVID.
Yeah, or provide a different line of services.
Yeah, and now they're like, hey,
from a different area. Yeah,
let's think about this more strategically. I think we could do better here. So yes, if we could get nonprofits to think about growth and have a growth mindset,
Mhm.
They too hire an extraordinary amount or
Yeah.
proportion of our workforce.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. That's awesome. And so we're going to have a show just on that. And because you have that network, it doesn't feel as isolating. I'll tell you this. So during COVID, I ran a leadership, I co-ran a leadership program with a colleague, Devin Dabbs from Field Partners, and we did it virtually. And now I co-lead another leadership program with UConn, and it's sponsored by the Community Foundation for New Haven, and they are live or in person. We're all live. I keep forgetting that we're all live, even if we're on Zoom.
I keep calling it real life.
I know. I read that the other day, and I was like,
retronym for things that don't happen over Zoom.
I know. I was like, did she just say real life? I did hear that, but so it's in person, and I have to tell you, I see such a big difference. You know, talking to people,
Yeah.
seeing them, being able to touch them or break bread with them, even if you don't touch them, is so powerful. And so I got to see it. Thank God that I've got to see it in that from that lens, because I have forgotten. I forgot what that was like.
Took everything online. I think there was a lot of concern, like, could we have productive meetings? Could we do any of this over Zoom? And we realized that we can, right? It works. Now that you're going back, do you find, is there anything about the Zoom space that you miss in real life?
Yes. The amount of time I spend on travel logistics, right? Like, I don't like to be late. So I'm constantly like thinking, like, what time do I leave or not leave? Do I have
that
to?
That is another skill that I found got really rusty for me during the pandemic.
Yeah.
How to work backwards from when I want to arrive to when I need to get ready to leave my house, or like what time I need to call the Uber to get to the airport, to get on the plane, to get where I'm going.
Yes.
Like, that just became really, really hard.
And then I think about, do I have to pay for parking, right? Something that I had not considered before. And food. So when I'm out, I think about food much more, because I have to plan for where I'm going to eat and what I'm going to eat
downstairs. Yeah.
Where when I'm home, I don't have to think about it so much. This morning I prepared my lunch, so it's already done. If I was outside, I would have to do a whole lot of thinking. Yeah. So it is different. It is different and stressful in a different way.
And what about like running the meeting? You know, do you think other people are similarly fatigued and strained by just being in a room full of people?
I think so. I think what we are getting are the individuals who have hectic mornings.
Yeah.
And this adds to the hecticness.
Yeah.
Versus if you have a hectic morning and you're just gonna turn on your laptop. Yeah. And you can have your video off. Right. So that's that. I could see it in people's faces.
Yeah.
All the time. I also noticed there's an enormous amount of apologizing. And I tell people they don't have to apologize. But people are constantly saying sorry. I'm sorry I'm late. I'm sorry I'm on my phone. I'm sorry. And so I'm like, nope, there's a lot of grace here. And maybe that's the awkwardness, but also remember we had a long time, not 2 full years, but we had a long time of being at home where we could do these things, and their lives have changed, right? So kids in schools have changed. The minute somebody is sick, your kid has to come home.
I remember, 5-10 years ago, I had a friend who was working from home just because her company decided to save money and not provide office space anymore. And she was so frustrated that her friends and family couldn't understand she still had a job, right?
Yes.
It was like, no, like, no, I can't go walk your dog. Like, no, you can't just drop in for coffee and stay for 2 hours. Like, I am working here. I'm still working. And now, of course, everybody is home all the time, and we get it. But the things that used to maintain the rigid boundaries, or the things that used to maintain the illusion of rigid boundaries between our work life and our home life disappeared, right? And that's good, right? I mean, we all used to go to work and fake that our houses and our families and our kids and our dogs had just disappeared, right? While we were paying attention at work. I was in a meeting recently. It was a real world meeting. Most of us were there. But one of the participants, her son got sick. And so she was on Zoom. And during the meeting, she turned her camera off. And we've just gotten so accustomed to that, right?
Yeah.
For a little while, her camera was off. It was fine. Then she came back. Well, it turned out like her camera was off because her son had just vomited all over the dining table, right? And which would have, even before COVID, that would have been happening, right? And it just would have been that much harder for her. I'm just going to Zoom because my kid is sick is a really nice grace that we have now. Yesterday, I logged onto a meeting and I don't know why, I just didn't realize my camera wasn't on. Nobody said anything.
That's interesting.
Nobody was like, hey, right? 15 minutes into the meeting, I was like, oh, oops, and I turned my camera on, but people were very gracious about it. Nobody said anything.
Yeah.
Which is great. Like, that's how it should be.
Yeah. No, it's we are different, for better, for worse.
We're gonna have to kind of bring this together. We are better. We are different. And there's going to be a little bit of discomfort again as we go back to pre-COVID levels of productivity, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And fit our new values and our new ways of working and embed them permanently, right?
Yeah.
These are not workarounds. These are expectations, right?
Yes. And the Great Resignation has not helped. Right. So even if you are overproducing or may end up overproducing because you feel a sense of guilt or because the demand for your services has increased, we are also dealing with a reduced workforce. And so that's putting pressure. I read an article. Obviously, it was sensationalized. I hope it was, but it was a little dramatic in that if we don't figure out this workforce issue, our nonprofit ecosystem is going to crumble. Now, I thought that was a little bit much, right? Because
it's
I think
melodramatic.
I know,
but
it sells papers.
Like, that's okay. I mean, if your workforce issue is that you got by for the last 100 years underpaying and overworking your staff, and doing what I call mission exploitation, which is where you treat your staff badly and then tell them that they have to take it because the work they do is so important. If that's been the model of the entire sector for a couple hundred years, and in this moment it collapses, I'm just going to go ahead and say I'm okay with that. It was not sustainable and it needed to collapse. Is that really unfortunate? Because there are people who need these services, and that's terrible. But I don't think we were fully aware of all of the harm we were doing in delivering services the way we had.
Yeah.
Right. And if we need this crisis for the industry to turn around and do something different, I'm here for it.
And, I see things in terms of opportunity, and we have 2 generations after us that are innovative, that look at life in a very different way, right? And many times I follow their lead. I trust them. They gave us Uber and Airbnb, and they gave us Google, and they gave us so many things. Well, maybe not Google. He might be our generation. But the point is that when something doesn't work for them, they decide to do something about it.
Right.
And so if the nonprofit ecosystem is going to crumble, I believe that we have the people that are going to rebuild something better. I truly believe that. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. I'm sorry?
In crisis is opportunity.
Yes, it definitely is. All right. Well, this was a great show. Just you and I really talking, being honest and talking about what year 3 looks like. But what we want our viewers to know is that we are looking forward to 2023, some evolving changes for Coffee Time, and just another year of really interesting
I think we're gonna
conversations
see
for and with the leaders.
Yeah, I can't wait. I think each year we've done one of these. It's been one more year of the pandemic shows.
I know.
I cannot wait to look back over 5 or 10 of them, right, and see the story evolving.
Yes, and this is why, at first when we talked about this theme, I was like, oh my God, we've had these conversations, but it's the documenting that I think is really interesting, and letting the world know, because these videos will live forever, that we are still struggling in the 3rd year, and that we have to still honor and give grace to each other. Okay, my friends, you have a wonderful weekend.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
A great weekend. Take care.